Today's date is July 26, 2007, and we're located at the Bob Stump VA Hospital in Prescott, Arizona. Present with us today are
Jane Shanahorn, camera.
Patsy Ray, coordinator.
Dot Williamson, wife.
and I'm Bill Morrison, interviewer. Today we're interviewing Bill Williamson Jr., who was born on January 20th, 1934, currently resides at 374 Summer Point in Prescott, Arizona. Bill did not serve in the military, but was an 8-year-old survivor of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And also during his career as a scientist, Bill was associated with the military in various atomic testing programs, as well as NASA in the Apollo 11 space program. Good morning, Bill. You're on.
Good morning, Bill.
I want to welcome you to the conference room and to the Veterans History Project. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Okay.
Because I think it's a pretty interesting one. And in order to get in the story, what I'd like to do is kind of set the scene first of all. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your early life, where you were born, what your family, because I'm sure you don't remember, what your family was kind of doing up to going to Pearl Harbor. Tell us a little bit about your father, his career, and the family.
Yep. Let's see, it was the first thing I remember about Rhode Island was when I was about 3 years old or so, and I broke my nose. That's my first memory. My Uncle Charlie had to set it, and it was cold, cold, cold outside.
Uh-huh.
And let's see, my dad's side of the family came from North Tiverton. I think there were 11 kids in the family, but 2 died young, and there were at least 5 boys, I think, who went into the Navy. One was an aviator, one was a submariner. I don't know if the other one did. One was the youngest one went to West Point, and then my dad. And out of the 2 of them, 2 got Medal of Honor. I think they're both Medal of Honor winners.
Really?
One got the Medal of Honor for sinking Japanese ships. I don't know why the other got the Medal of Honor, but he was a captain of a destroyer, 3 destroyers, I think, in the South Pacific. And we found out later, actually, at our wedding in 1957, my uncle came there and a friend of my wife came there, and they met each other, and they were the only 2 survivors on that destroyer. Uncle was a captain, and that other fellow was a radio man.
So you have 2 uncles that are Medal of Honor winners.
Yeah.
Very good. I don't think there's very many people that say that.
I looked him up on the web.
Okay. But your family basically, while you were in Rhode Island, was a Navy family.
Well, my mom's wasn't. My mom was a descendant of General Wilcox, I think it was, in the Revolutionary War.
Mm-hmm.
And she said one of those natives went back, one of those relatives went back to the Mayflower. I've never tracked that down, so I can't verify that.
But what I meant was that you were part of a Navy family.
Yeah, they were all Navy.
You were dependents.
Yes,
Right?
right.
And
Yes.
your father was stationed, I guess, in
Right.
Newport
Yes,
at that particular
that's right.
time.
Yep.
And he was a Navy officer.
He was a chief petty officer at that time.
Ah, okay, so he came up through the ranks.
He came up through the ranks, yep.
All right. And your mother was a dedicated military wife.
No. She hated the military.
Okay, well.
Her
That's
dad
too
was
bad.
a baker. Her dad was a baker, and she was a school teacher.
Okay.
So-
But at 3 years old, I guess you, well, let's go back a little bit. You also had a sister.
Yep,
She's 3 years older than you were.
yeah,
Okay. And that made for your family at that particular
at
time.
that particular time.
And
yeah.
you picked up when you were about 3 years old and moved to Hawaii.
Yep.
Wow, pretty
Yeah.
good. All
Yep.
right.
And I remember some early recollections from there was, one of the first ones was having tonsils out and with ether.
Yeah.
And the ether nightmares would last for years after that. And that's why I guess they don't use things like that.
Foul tasting stuff.
I don't remember that, I just remember nightmares, nightmares, nightmares.
Well, do you remember anything about your life prior to Pearl Harbor Day?
Yeah, a lot when my brother was born, and that
Mhm.
was in 1941, June 12th, 1941. Because my mom was in the hospital, I guess they kept him for about a week then or something like that. And my dad and my sister and I would go down to Waikiki Beach and swim in the afternoons. And then some other people watched for us. At that time, we were living on Waialae Boulevard. And then later we moved to 14th and Mahina, I think it was. I don't remember the address. Then there's pretty much a blank in there between that, just particular.
Remember a little bit about school around the age of
Yeah.
7 or 8?
Yep.
Yeah.
We went to Elite Yolani School,
Uh-huh.
and I don't remember where that was, but it was close to 14th and Mahina.
But you were leading
Distance.
a dependent life
Right,
in Hawaii,
yep. It was,
and that was kind of decadent, probably.
yeah, it was very decadent.
Even for an
remember-
8-year-old.
I remember wearing a lot of bare feet and shorts, and that's
Mm.
about what our standard attire was.
Were you a close-knit family?
Not after my dad went to war, until he came
But
back.
up to that
Yeah.
time,
Yeah,
while you were in Hawaii,
Yeah.
I mean, did he go to sea at any time? You were there
Yeah.
4 years, did he go to sea at
Yeah.
any time? or-
I'm trying to remember. I think he did go to sea for a while, and then he came back. He was aboard the USS Lark, and that was a minesweeper, and then we had some friends on the Ugalala, USS Ugalala, which was a mine layer, I think. And we used to go down Sunday afternoons when he'd have the duty, and then we'd have dinner and go fishing off the fantails of those ships.
Oh, that must have been pretty exciting for a kid like yourself.
I remember, so I guess.
Yeah.
It made an
Okay.
impression, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, all right. How about your sister? Did you get along with your sister at that age?
Oh, yeah.
Usually 8 versus 11 or something, you're at war.
No,
No?
we were good friends, yeah.
Good, good.
And my brother and I became good friends.
Mhm.
When he
He's
got
a
older-
youngster,
when
he was
got
a
older.
baby.
Well, we watched our little baby brother.
Yeah. Do you have any memorable experiences, most memorable experiences of that time in Hawaii up to December 7th, 1941?
Probably not.
Okay,
Nothing critical there.
yeah. But there comes a day that's very memorable in your mind, and that's December 7th, 1941.
Yeah, that was certain incidents, I guess, throughout a person's life you remember very well, and that
Yeah.
was one day.
Yeah. Why don't you describe that Sunday morning for us? From the-
As
from the-
best as I recollect.
From the
yeah.
standpoint of an 8-year-old.
Yeah. I don't remember what time we got up that morning, but it was, I was going to go to a show with a friend of mine. And I was going to go to Sunday school and give him a call, tell him where we'd meet. And I got on the phone at about 5 minutes to 8, just before 8 o'clock, and I guess that's just about when they started the raid. And I tried to get him on the phone, and there was no answer. It was like a dead phone, and maybe it rang a couple times erratically. And somebody came on the phone and said, "Get off the phone, there's a war on." So I went into my dad, went in to see my dad, and I said, "There's a war on." They said, "The Japanese are bombing Pearl Harbor."
And you couldn't hear that.
Yes, we could hear that. Yeah, we were close enough to hear all of the racket, but they thought that there were maneuvers going on. They kept saying, "Boy, there's a lot of noise from the maneuvers," and I don't remember where they thought the maneuvers were going. I want to say Hickam, but I
How far were you from this activity?
we looked that up, and I'd say within 5 miles.
I see, okay. So you didn't live on base, you were up in?
No, we were at the foot of Williamson Rise
Okay.
at that time.
Okay.
And then my dad got in the car. They were saying, so I remember it on the radio, they were just saying, "All military personnel report immediately to your base." And so he got all of his things together and jumped in the car. And
What was he
vanished.
doing at that time in terms of Navy?
He was just transferred to the Pennsylvania, I think it's in May 1941, because I have the old clock that his shipmates gave to him on my mantle, and it says May, and I forget the date, 1941. So he was just transferred to the Pennsylvania at that time.
And his ship was in port?
And Pennsylvania was in dry dock.
Ah, okay.
And,
That's a sitting target.
yeah, well, Pennsylvania was the fleet battleship at that time for the Pacific.
And your father had been commissioned by that time?
No,
No.
no, he didn't get commissioned until later in 42, I think.
Okay.
Anyhow, he took off in the car and went to work to Pearl. We were out on the front, and I vaguely remember seeing poofs of smoke and stuff in the sky. And we didn't hear anything from him, of course. Nobody could communicate with anybody except the military, and I think they were having a hard time talking with each other. And then that night, I remember everything was in a blackout, but we were sitting in our back lanai, looking up at the hills, and boy, there were all sorts of lights splashing on and off, so everybody thought, of course, that those were the Japanese signaling the invasion forces that were going to land the next day. And then we sat out there watching that night, and the next day there were all sorts of rumors about the Japanese parachuters had landed, and they were on Waikiki now, working their way up through the city. And nobody knew, of course, what was true or untrue.
How did that affect you? Do you remember your feelings at that time?
At that time, I think an 8-year-old pretty much feels invincible until something happens.
I bet your mother was pretty worried,
She was pretty worried, yeah.
because she had
3
the
kids.
3 kids.
My brother at that time was 6 months old.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So she had her hands full,
Yeah, she did, yeah,
taking care of the 3 of you.
yeah.
So,
Then there was a flight of planes that came over one time. I don't remember if that was the afternoon of the 7th or the 8th, but there was all sorts of anti-aircraft fire that went off. And I think those shells went up and came down in, of all places, the Japanese section of
how fitting.
And I think I had that recorded somewhere, but I don't remember where I have it recorded.
Well, you have it recorded now.
Okay. Let's see. Then there's sort of a big blank up there, except I did go down to Elite Yolani School. We were able to go out a couple days later, and they had it all trenched up, and I think that's where I picked up some of these 2 shells up there. And these look like 50 caliber shells, and they've hit something hard. They got the bent points on them.
Okay.
And
Want to hold them up a little?
hold them up a little bit. How about that?
That's good.
Got a background, okay?
Well, by the time you say you went down to school, have you come across now any of your friends, like the one you were trying to telephone, and
I don't remember.
Okay.
I just don't remember that. It's
as
just
far as
a
you know,
guess.
it's just still the 4 of you?
Yep.
Okay.
And then, when this was half a year later or something, my dad gave me these 2 pieces of shrapnel, and that's a good chunk, and this is another chunk, and he said these came through the car when he went back to it after he got to the Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So it was on the dry dock, near the dry dock there somewhere, and he said they came through the roof.
Wow.
So,
Huh.
they're goodly chunks.
Wow.
Then let's see, between the 8th and the 25th is pretty much a blank for me now. I can't remember that much of it. But about 10 o'clock on December 25th, Christmas Day, my mom got a telephone call saying that she had to be out of there by 2.
To be evacuated.
To be evacuated, yeah. And 2 o'clock, I think somebody came up and get us with a car. I don't remember who it was. Maybe one of our friends or something. Took the whole family down to the pier, And as I recall, we were allowed one suitcase each. And I remember,
This is Christmas Day.
this is Christmas Day, yeah,
Well, how fitting for an 8-year-old.
that's right.
I mean, no presents, no tree, no
Not that I-
nothing.
Well, I got a present, I guess, getting out of there.
But you only realize that now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I do remember, we went down below decks in the Lurleen, we were all huddled together, 4 of us, somebody showing us where we go. And they opened up a stateroom door, and it was a little bitty stateroom, probably meant for 2 people, but they had something like 6 families in there. And they just had hammocks strung, you had to duck under hammocks. And they had, I guess there were 2 bunks on each side for 4 people, and then they had strung the hammocks all across for the kids to sleep in.
I see. Well, let's back up a little bit,
Okay.
a minute here. This started on December the 7th.
Mhm.
We're up to December 25th, so you roughly spent about 3 weeks or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. The 4 of you together. You hadn't heard from your father.
No,
You didn't hear from your father, from what I understand, even up to the time you were evacuated.
that's correct.
Must have been awful,
Well,
especially
okay.
for your mother.
Probably for my mom.
But you don't remember.
Never talked with her about that. Yeah, my dad, as for me, was gone to sea and there was a war on,
Did your dad ever tell you what happened to him between those
No.
dates?
no,
Never did?
no,
Did you ever ask?
I don't remember.
Wow.
I may have it on tape somewhere because we do have an interview with my dad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have it on cassette tape if you'd
Interesting.
like it sometime.
Sure.
tells us
We'd love to
history.
hear it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, if you don't remember, and he didn't tell you, I guess we can't go there.
Total blank.
Yeah, well,
It's just been too long.
yeah. But very profound in your memory is the fact that you got aboard ship. Do you remember the name of the ship?
USS Lurleen.
Okay, all right. Big troop transport?
No, that was a commercial liner, I don't forget, the
Matson.
Matson line, yeah.
Okay.
Matson line, and we came back, and everybody, in the meantime, coming back, I do remember one time we had an alert that they spotted submarines, they were gonna attack the convoy. And I was up on deck somewhere, and a man took me and said, stand here, right by that lifeboat, and don't move, and if they tell you to get on that lifeboat, get on that lifeboat. And I don't know where my mom and my sister, my brother was probably with my mom, I don't know where they were aboard the ship, but she was worried after we got back together again.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember her telling me that she thought she saw the Pennsylvania in the convoy. And I could not identify ships at that time.
Yeah, yeah,
And she was correct, we found out later.
yeah. Do you remember anything about life aboard ship as you went back, other than
No.
what you've just said?
No, not really.
Were you and your sister tight at that time, trying
Yeah,
to support
yeah,
your
we-
mother? You remember that?
I don't know about that. But we hung out a lot together.
You hung out a lot together, and I suppose you both supported one another.
Yeah,
I would think.
Yeah, as kids do,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So, you were aboard ship with probably several thousand of evacuees,
I have no
families?
idea what the number size that the Lurleen carried. Maybe it's usually typical at that time around a 500 passenger ship, but they probably had several overload by a factor of 2 or 3 or something
Absolutely.
like that.
Absolutely.
And then the crew.
Weren't no
Big.
med crews, that's
No,
for sure.
it was not.
San Francisco Bay.
Certainly wasn't that.
Okay, and then you,
Well,
ship came back to where?
Well, we didn't know where it was going. They didn't tell us where we were going.
That's nice.
And, of course, we were from Hawaii, and it was cold as a dickens going back. Everybody was convinced they were taking us up to Anchorage or someplace, up to Alaska. And nobody knew until we went under the bridge, it's Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And it was all shrouded with fog, I remember. We were up on the deck with my mom, and she said, it must be Alaska. And then out of the fog loomed the Golden Gate Bridge.
Nobody said a word about where you were going,
Nobody,
even to
no.
the point of going under the bridge.
Nope. Not that I
I'll be
remember.
darned.
And then we tied up, my dad was on the pier, and he was in Pennsylvania, and he did escort the convoy back.
So you were
So,
reunited.
We were reunited at that time, and I think that was January 2nd, 1942. I think it took about a week to cross at that time.
Heck of a holiday season you had,
Yeah,
right?
I remember that one well. Probably better than any other one.
Yeah, I guess you do.
Yeah.
No Christmas carols, no Christmas
I
dinner,
can't say that there
no,
were.
nothing.
No,
Christmas didn't exist for you at that particular year.
well, I guess it existed, but it was occupied
Not
with
the
other
usual
things
kind.
than the usual Christmas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember when you went across, did you go with any of your school buddies? Were
No.
they aboard ship?
No,
No?
no.
Huh. I'll be darned, you were just by yourself with your family.
Well, I mean, there were a lot
In
of
terms of
kids and
people you
everybody.
knew.
Yeah, in terms of
Yeah.
people we knew, nobody that I knew was on there.
Really?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Have you ever kept in touch with any of those kids that were your school chums during the 40s?
No, my dad and mom did. They went back to see a Dr. Ueno, who was a Japanese dentist. And they were still friends with him, and they went back to see them probably in 1971 or 72. And we went back through Hawaii in 1971. And it was really strange because we went on the Orsoga. I had a year sabbatical in Australia. I was invited to go to Australia. And on the way back, on the way over, we stopped in Honolulu. And I got off the ship, and it was like an open page coming open. I remembered the address, and I remembered where we lived and a bunch of events. That may have been good because I would have forgotten a bunch of those things.
Yeah.
But we went to where I thought our old house was. And the kids were with us. Went to where I thought the old house was, and we drove up to the corner on 14th and Mahina. I looked at the house and I said, "That's our house. That's where we live, but that's not our house." She said, "Well, you forgot." And I said, "No, I didn't forget." And there was a guy in the driveway, and I said, "I gotta go talk with him." And she said, "No, don't, you'll embarrass yourself." But I went up and talked to the guy and said, "Excuse me, but says, has this always been here?" And he said, "Yeah, we built this house. It's always been here." I said, "Oh, I don't remember that." He said, "I think we used to live on this corner," and I described the house. It was inside, and I said there was a screened veranda downstairs and upstairs, big avocado and a tree in the left-hand side of the yard. He said, "How did you know that?" He said, "We built this house in 1952, and we tore down the old one." And that was the old one
Okay.
that I described.
Okay.
So I did remember that, but it was really strange for me to go back there and have all of the memories come back so fresh.
Mm. And that was the first time you'd gone back?
1971, yeah.
Okay. Have you gone back since?
Oh yeah, we go back every year.
And do you still visit?
We don't go to that island that much into Oahu. We go back to Maui every
I
year
see.
for 3 weeks.
Okay. All right. So there's no need to go back to Hawaii, Oahu
Wow.
at that? Okay.
No,
All right.
I don't even know if the Japanese dentist is still alive or not. Probably not.
Okay.
He'd be close to 100.
Probably not, you're right.
Yeah.
By any chance, I do know that there was a story that you had that one of your father's Japanese friends wanted him to invest in this little Japanese electronics company, and he refused to do it.
$500 Sony, I think it was.
You sure could be on Easy Street.
$500 would have gone a long way.
Yeah, it certainly would have back in those days. Okay. Well, as you've grown now to be an adult, do the memories of Pearl Harbor ever come back to you from time to time, or?
Just when I look at the memorabilia and see a picture on TV or something like that, read books. I read a lot of books about it for a long time.
Sure. You become a Pearl Harbor expert, I would imagine.
I was at one time, and there was memories of fading fast, even the things I learned.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't keep in contact with anybody that perhaps
No,
have
all
gone
my
through this.
uncles are gone now,
Mhm.
and they would come out occasionally during World War II and come by and see us.
Mhm.
And I talked with my Uncle Eddie, the one who got the medal. Oh, and I think I told you this before, but I guess I could repeat it for the camera. He was a torpedo pilot. And he got the medal because he sunk one of the first Japanese ships that was sunk.
Really?
Yeah. And his tactic, my Uncle Eddie was a very wise guy, like most fighter pilots are.
Is that wise as like hockey?
I wasn't, yeah, cocky, that's very. And he told me that his technique was to come down as close to the ship as he could, not a mile away, and come in with his torpedo and launch it, and then go over the ship. Because as they came in very far away, a mile away, they were all emptying as much lead at them as they could, and torpedo pilots didn't last very long. So he would come in as high as he could, drop down as fast as he could, and take a short run, launch his torpedo, and get out of there as fast as he could. And that's what he did, and he was berated for doing that, and I think he told his flight commander, F you. And that was the end of his career as a pilot.
Oh, really?
They took his rank away, yep, and he came out a chief petty officer,
Yet he had the medal.
yep.
I'll be darned.
But I think they later went to that tactic.
I was gonna ask if they did, because
Yeah,
it seemed to save lives, I
yeah,
would think.
yeah.
Okay.
That's the
Well-
story as I remember it. And he did come out and he got shot through the foot. He said he was flying low over the water, and he had some Japanese Zeros coming after him. He couldn't get rid of them, and a bullet or something went through his foot. And then out of nowhere, I guess, according to him, somebody came and chased the Zeros away, so he managed to get back. And I think he was stationed on either the Lexington or the Enterprise.
Both extremely active carriers during
Yes,
World
and
War II.
both sunk, as I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, as far as Pearl Harbor is concerned, out of all the things that you do remember that went on that particular day, or let's say that particular period of 3 weeks or whatever, what to you is the most memorable?
Probably the phone call, trying to get on
Really?
the phone that morning, yeah, and somebody saying, there's a war on, get off the phone.
I'll be darned, you didn't even hesitate answering that, because that must,
Yeah,
that's
a-
there.
Yeah,
Mm.
and then going out on the porch,
Uh-huh.
and my mom saying, come back out of there,
Mhm.
and seeing puffs of smoke and stuff up in the air.
I certainly wouldn't have envied her job with the three of you,
Yeah,
and the husband down at the USS Pennsylvania.
yeah.
Didn't
yeah.
hear from him for 3 weeks.
No.
Maybe even 4 weeks, let's say, because you didn't see him till you got back
It
to
was
San
about
Francisco.
close to a month,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Well, let's pick up kind of back at San Francisco. What happened?
Oh, we came in, and my dad and another fellow, Bob Weaver, who was at that time of Pearl Harbor, I think, stationed upon the Ogallala, but he may have been transferred real close to the 7th, because they were both there, and they were both good friends, and they had rented a flat somehow, or soon after we were there, they rented a flat in San Francisco. And the Pennsylvania and some of the other ships had gone into dry dock at Hunters Point. And so my dad was stationed at Hunters Point for 2 years, from 42, I think it was, to 44. And they were repairing ships. And that's how we met a bunch of my uncles that would come out through there and then go out to the Pacific. And they would come through, and we had a bunch of cousins come through. One cousin came through, Johnny Box. He flew Liberators, I think it was, over Europe. He was shot down. He was a prisoner of war with the Germans for a couple of years. And he came through and he was on his way out to the Pacific. And he told me some of his stories, but I just remember one of them. And that was he jumped out of his plane, landed on the ground. He said, "You wouldn't believe this." He said, "But when I woke up, there was a beautiful girl standing over me." And I think that was probably just a story for an 8-year-old kid or a
Maybe
10-year-old kid.
You'll never know.
I'll never know.
So you and the family were reunited in the San Francisco
Yep.
area, and you just picked up where you left off, more or less.
Yep.
In
And
2 years.
Yep, 2 years. Then he was transferred, I think, to the USS Bogue, which was a flat top, a jeep carrier, they call them. And those were the converted Liberty ships. Henry Kaiser, around the end of the war, I think, was building one of these Liberty ships a day. And some of them, then they decided they needed small carriers, and they took the Liberty ships and just put a flight deck on them. And the Bogue was one of those. And he was in just at the end of World War II with the Germans, and then he went through the canal and got on the end of the Pacific.
I see. So all this time, while your father was back at sea, you were still living in San
We were
Francisco?
still living in San Francisco.
So that was your home?
Yep, that was our home, and
Okay.
we lived there. I went to Alvarado School, and then I went to James Lake.
What do you remember about San Francisco and the war and your life at
Cold.
that
Always
Damn.
cold. Cold and moist.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Did you go to any kind of dependent school, or you went to
No,
public
just
schools?
public school, yeah. And I do remember coming back to the 3rd grade in San Francisco, and in Honolulu, they taught you how to use cursive writing in the 4th grade, and I was in the 3rd grade. And in San Francisco, they taught you in the 3rd grade, and they put me in the 4th grade. So I never learned to write cursive,
Really?
except on my own.
Yeah, there you go.
So I
Okay.
mostly even print to this day.
Okay. Did your notoriety about being a survivor of Pearl Harbor precede you into the schools? Were you?
No, but it was there after we got there and told our stories, of course, and all of the people thought we were black.
Huh?
Yeah, we were so dark.
Really?
Yeah.
From the sun, the
Yeah,
warm
from the
weather,
sun,
the
warm
beaches?
weather. Well, I never wore anything except shorts when I was out of school, and we just run around all the time.
Hmm.
My sister had a hard time of it, because people were quite prejudiced, and you're black, you're a Negro.
Really?
No, I'm not, yeah.
My, I've never heard that before.
Well,
Huh. Okay, but those tans fade,
yeah, they fed.
especially in San Francisco.
Then they knew she was white.
Okay,
But
all right.
they didn't want anything to do with her for a while.
Okay. So you stayed in San Francisco for how long?
Let's see, till after World War II ended.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the end and the big flights of planes coming over San Francisco because they wanted to demonstrate what it was like during D-Day. And so they had flights and flights of planes come over. These flights, they just came over for a couple hours. I remember that, and then we went up to Tacoma, Washington. And we
You're about 11 now?
Let's see, yeah, something like that, 11, 12.
But nobody looked at you in awe, none of your friends, when you went to school, said, geez, a Pearl Harbor survivor.
No,
over there."
that was nothing then.
Not a thing,
No,
huh?
no,
I'm surprised.
no.
I would have looked at you in awe.
Well, I should have known you.
I look at you in awe now.
There's probably not too many of us left.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. But, so where in San Francisco did you live?
19th Street first.
Right
In the Castro-
downtown?
No, Castro District.
Huh?
And we lived there, and then, boy, I don't remember when it was. It must have been about 44, something, just about the time my dad went back to sea. We bought a place on 21st Street.
Mm.
Great big old house. It was built in 1905. I think it was completed just before the big earthquake.
Mhm.
And that's in the Castro District.
Okay.
And we lived there for years. I think my folks didn't sell that. Maybe the seventies or something
I
like that.
see. Kept it and rented it and things like that as you...
Yeah, they moved to
Okay.
Woodside.
So you left San Francisco after the war was over and Dad came back and went...
He was stationed in Tacoma, the
Mhm.
shipyard in Tacoma. They were mothballing a bunch of ships, and then they'd sail them over to Bremerton, and some of those ships may still be mothballed up in Bremerton.
Was he commissioned at this time?
Yeah, he was commissioned in about 42. I
Okay.
think they put all of the men who wanted to be commissioned to a career, pretty much had a chance to be commissioned. He chose to do that.
Okay,
Yeah, he wound up being a full commander.
I see.
Came out that way.
Okay.
And one of the uncles, I told you, came out as chief petty officer. Submariner, I think, came out as chief petty officer. My Uncle Frank, the one who was sunk on the destroyer, wound up being an admiral. He was the admiral of the Pacific, Mediterranean for a number of years. And then he went to the Pentagon, and he retired.
So they all survived the
Yep.
war?
Yep,
Great.
yeah.
Okay. All right, Tacoma, and your dad was still in the Navy for a while, I understand?
Yeah.
You had to move every 2 years or
Yeah,
whatever?
about every 2 or 4 years, because he'd go to sea. I
Mhm.
think they did 2-2, 2-2,
Mhm.
and like that. And then, let's see, after Tacoma, he went aboard the USS Mount McKinley.
Mhm.
And that was the communications ship during the Korean War. And they were the ones who went in, MacArthur was aboard the McKinley when they went into, I think it was Busan, wasn't
Or Incheon?
it? Incheon, it was Incheon, yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
And he had a story, and I don't remember what it was, but something went wrong with the communications devices, and they were gonna have to call off the invasion, and he went down and fixed it, whatever it was, in the engine room or in the radar stations.
Your father did?
My father did, yeah, and I don't remember what it was.
Okay. All right, so he's in 2 wars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And in the meantime, you and the family were back in the States, you were going to school, maybe you'd reached
Yeah.
high school by then?
Yeah, I was just about out of high school.
You were just
Got
about
out
out.
51, I got out of high school.
What'd you think of being a Navy brat?
I didn't even notice it. So I don't
Really?
know, no.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, they'd say his dad's in the Navy,
Mhm.
but I don't remember ever living on base, so we were not
I see.
base kids.
Okay.
We were always off the base, and I think that's probably because my mom disliked being a Navy wife.
She really stuck it out.
Yes, she did, and
So, you went through high school, did you participate in sports or?
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
and some football and some track.
Okay. When did you get into music? I know you're a musician,
Yeah.
and when did you all of a sudden
Oh, I remember when I got into music, because I always liked the banjo. I liked Pete Seeger. And this was when I was in graduate school, so it must have been about 59.
Oh, so this is years later.
Way back, yeah. It was many years later, and I went out one day and told Dot I was going out for a while. I went out and bought a banjo, and it cost me 1 month's salary. And I brought it home. She said, "You better learn to play that." So I learned to play that.
Okay, all right. Well, where were you located when you got out of high school? Which grade?
San Francisco.
San Francisco, you're back in
Yeah,
San
we were back to
Francisco.
San Francisco.
I expect you went back there every time your dad went to
My
sea.
mom loved San Francisco. It was a beautiful time.
Well, she hated the Navy, so she got San
We got
Francisco
San
instead.
Francisco, yeah.
Okay,
Then
fair
they-
enough.
Then they eventually moved down to Woodside, which is close to Palo Alto.
Okay, all right. And you graduated from high school,
Yeah.
and you knew you were gonna go to college?
Yep.
Did you have any idea what you wanted to do at that time?
Well, I wanted to go into the Air Force and become a pilot.
Ah, so you want a military career?
Yep.
Okay.
But I was going to go to a technical school, Cogswell Technical School in San Francisco for electronics.
Mhm.
And about a week before the school started, I got a letter from San Francisco State College, it was called then, but it's now called San Francisco State University. And they had a program, they were just starting up in ROTC, Air Force ROTC. So I went down and talked with the guys, Air Force officers, and they said, oh yeah, you can become a pilot through this program. That was that. So I took the exam, got into college, and went into the Air Force ROTC, and that's what I wanted to do. You know, I was always poor in mathematics, so I decided to major in mathematics.
You were gonna get over that.
And I did.
You were a turncoat. You
That's
should have
right.
become a Navy pilot.
But I was gonna become a pilot, and I could pass the exams at that time, the eye exams. But during that 2-year period of time, when I was first 2 years in college, the Korean War had ended, and they didn't want pilots.
Mhm.
And so the restrictions were then you had to have 20/20 to even be what they call a co-pilot or flight officer then.
Mhm.
And I didn't have 20/20 vision after being 2 years in college anymore.
Mhm.
So I just dropped the Air Force ROTC, continued in math, and picked up physics along the way.
I see. So for somebody that didn't like math and didn't get along with it, you really got into it.
Yep, yep. I got all A's in math
Okay,
and physics.
okay.
And physics was by far the toughest for me, and that's why I decided to go into physics.
He likes a challenge.
Okay.
I got all A's in physics, but I had to work real hard at it.
Okay. So you started school at the University, San Francisco University?
San Francisco State University,
Okay.
well, it's called that now, it's
Yeah.
San Francisco State College
Mhm.
at that
And how long did you go there?
time. 3.5 years, I think.
Were you degreed there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And I found out the last year that if I took 21 hours, I could get my degree in 3.5 years. So I took 3 physics courses, 3 math courses, and 3 chemistry courses. And nearly died. It was the chemistry, organic chemistry, because I can't memorize things. I have, just remember things real good for short term, but if I remember something today, it'll be gone tomorrow.
I see.
And that's why I did physics.
So you're gonna forget this interview tomorrow?
I will forget this interview. What did you say your name was?
Okay.
I think I'd rather be a cowboy. I think I'd
So
rather
after college, you got your degree?
Yep.
And during college, is that the period of time when you were working for the government
Yeah.
in the outback, so to speak?
Yeah,
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
that was in Sequoia National Park. At that time, I don't remember what the minimum wage was, but working up in Bliss Rust and Rescue and Fire, you could make about 3 to 4 times what the minimum wage was. And the work in the low country, that's at 7,000 feet, you work 5 days a week, and if you went up to the high country, you would work 6 days a week. And the 6th day was time and a half, and the fires or rescue were double time. So the first year I stayed down low, and I made enough during that year with fires and rescue and working. I made enough in that year to pay my way through college. And at that time, I must point out.
Pay your way through college for all?
Year, yeah.
Really?
But one has to remember, I went through the California
Yeah.
system at its heyday,
Yeah.
and tuition was $25 a semester, and my books cost about $25 a semester. So I could go through college for $500 to $1,000 or something like that.
I got you. Okay.
So it was, you couldn't do that now.
And you were working for the Department of Plant Quarantine and Entomology?
Entomology.
Entomology?
Yeah. that-
That's a mouthful.
It sure was, and then they changed the name. I'm not sure if that became the Department of Agriculture or something else.
Mhm.
And then they changed it several other times. So I don't know what it's called now or what it has evolved into. But
Okay.
I went up in 52, 53, 54. I went to summer school at Berkeley because I'd switched over. And then 55 was my last year up there.
These were all summer jobs?
It was 3 months, yeah,
And you called it what? Fire rescue and blister?
blister rust, yeah.
What's blister rust?
Well, blister rust is a rust that gets on the back of ribes, like gooseberries and evidentia and some other plants. And it forms a spore, and then the spore would erupt, and this would carry to the white pines, and the blister rust killed the white pines. So the treatment was to kill the intermediate host, which was the ribes and gooseberries and things like that. So we went up and we sprayed them with DDT, Agent Orange. Not DDT, Agent Orange. What is it called? I can't remember the other technical name for it, but we did it with Agent Orange.
So when you weren't rescuing and putting out fires, you were spraying DDT or Agent Orange?
Agent Orange, yeah, all over. And I still don't have any hair on any of my legs from Agent Orange.
So it got you.
Yeah, because we used to have that stuff in packs that would be sloshing all over you.
And nobody knew how dangerous it was?
No, nobody knew how dangerous it was, and there wasn't any danger because it's long-term.
And that besides, the 19, 20-year-old kid is invincible.
Well, I don't care, that's gonna happen to me years from now.
Do you have any memorable experiences about those years that you worked back in the backcountry?
Yeah, a couple of rescues were tough rescues.
Would you like to share them?
As best I recollect again, I think one of the most impressive rescues, or hardest ones that we went in, that made it the most impressive, was one to a fellow who was up at a place called Bear Paw Meadows. It was about 12 miles in, I think. And his friend had walked out and said they were up above a little waterfall. The fellow got too close to the edge, slipped off the edge and went down the waterfall. They pulled him out down below and they thought he broke his back.
Go ahead, she'll just change the tape over. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Is it on tape or is it on camera?
Yes, on camera.
Oh, okay. Let's see, so this fella slipped off and they thought he was, had a broken back. His friend came out, so we got back to our camp at about 4 o'clock. We had an early dinner, sandwiches and the like. Popped into a truck, and as I recall, we hiked in from, I think it was, no, it wasn't Mineral King, some giant forest probably, we hiked in.
But this is all in the Sequoia National Forest.
In Sequoia National Park, and it was early, so they hadn't fixed up all the trails back in there yet. There were little trails. There were 6 of us, and I think one ranger went in with us. And his friend walked in again, or another friend walked in. There was another fellow who knew him. And we walked in, and we had one of these little baskets, stretchers, wire basket. We went up and got him into the basket and brought him back, and I remember, boy, that was a tough haul, because there were only 6 of us, and we were hauling that guy out, and the trail was narrow, and you'd be either way down below the trail or walking on a bank above the trail, and there were trees across the trail. They hadn't cleared it all up. And it was a tough haul to get him out of there.
How far did you hike him out?
Well, we carried him up 12, I think it's 12 miles.
Really?
I'd have to check the map. So we hiked in 12 and walked out 12. Then he had a long run down to Visalia after we got him to the ambulance.
Was his back actually broken?
Yes, he had a broken back. I remember him all the time, how much father. Of course, we were ready to knock him out by that time.
He probably would have appreciated that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
It was a hot.
and how about your second rescue that you?
It was another one. I remember we went way down to the Kern River, and a fellow came out and said his friend had broken his leg or his ankle down there. He didn't know quite where he was, but he was down there somewhere. So we carried in a basket again. 6 of us went down. Maybe we had 8 that time, because it was really a rough haul out there. There's no trail. It's just huge rocks down the Kauai River at that place.
Wow.
So we had to go down and find it and put them in a basket and carry
How
them
many
out.
miles in and out?
I don't know, but we didn't get out till 12 or 1 o'clock, so it was probably 2-3 miles down, 2-3 miles up, but that up was really tough.
Okay.
Because the guys at the bottom would have all the weight, so
Yeah.
they'd have to rotate around.
So what did you do after you got out of college and you got into a legit job, so to speak?
I went to Berkeley for about a year and got tired of school.
Were you after a master's or something
No,
at that point?
PhD.
PhD.
PhD, but just got tired.
Why did you want a PhD?
Seemed like the toughest thing to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. But you came out with a bachelor's degree of some kind.
Baccalaureate, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
I was going to Berkeley,
Uh-huh.
and then after a year, I just got tired of doing it.
Mhm.
We had to drive over there, it was about an hour.
Yeah.
Drive over, an hour to drive back.
But the
And
only,
had to work hard. Berkeley was a tough place for physics, and my graduate courses had about 250 students in them. It was very competitive.
Mhm.
I was just tired. So, so that's when I went to work for the Radiological Defense Laboratory.
okay, you didn't have a PhD at that
No,
time?
not even a master's. at
Not
that
even a
time,
master's?
no. But I continued to take a course or two while I was working,
Uh-huh,
and then I'd work Saturdays
okay,
to make up the time.
I see. Did you have any long-range plan in mind at this time, that I wanted to get a PhD and I wanted to go do this? Or were you
Yes.
just?
That
Okay.
you just said. Yeah, wanted to get a PhD in physics.
And that's it, that was
That's
your,
it.
that was your
Well,
plan?
I thought I'd like to teach at that time.
Mhm. But you ultimately did?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. But you didn't know that?
No,
It wasn't a firm
no.
thing in your mind then?
No.
Okay, all right,
So then, with the Defense Laboratory in '56, I went out to Red Wing, Operation Red Wing. And
and that was where?
that was out in Bikini Atoll and Eniwetok Atoll, and I was on Perry Island, and I'm not sure which atoll that was called, up where Perry Island was, but it's in the Marshall Islands.
So this was 1956 that you did that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Were you married by this time? Had
No.
you met Dot?
No, had I met Dot? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember when we met, she may recall that better. At the camp, I know, remember the ski
53.
camp, 1953.
And you were a college student at that time,
Yeah,
so,
we met at a ski camp,
I see.
and she was in a physics class, she loved physics.
Ah,
Nearly killed me. One course.
well, you had something in common immediately.
She was a math major.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, she could tutor you,
Yeah.
right? Because
No.
you
The
hated
other way
math.
around.
The other way. So anyhow, we went out to Pacific in '56.
For how long?
I don't remember, but it was less than a year,
Okay.
because the operation just went for about 6 months or something like that.
Were you hired into the U.S. Naval Radiological Defense Lab
Yes.
specifically to go out
No,
to Operation
no,
Red
but
Wing?
they, during those operations, they put everybody out there they could. And being a young bachelor,
You were
I was
prime.
prime target, yeah, and I wanted to go too.
I bet you did.
Uh,
I bet you did. You knew you were going out there for atomic testing purposes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Not much, it just, that's where I'm
Another
going.
invincible
Another-
21-year-old, right?
Another disco, yeah, sounds like fun.
Well, I happen to know that Red Wing was the second series of atomic testing that was being done by that particular outfit. The first one was called Castle.
Castle.
And it was a disaster in terms of radiation episodes.
And Greenhouse, I think, was another one. This
I
Castle,
don't remember.
Greenhouse, and Red Wing.
Uh-huh.
And before maybe Bikini Baker was the
Yeah.
shot. I have pictures of that. Big mushroom cloud and ships being sucked up.
Right,
Sucked
right.
in cloud.
But I know that Castle had a lot of radiation problems that came up due to that test. People even died from it.
You know, that in Red Wing, they had some of the pilots go through the clouds, and they'd come back and they'd be throwing up.
So none of that concerned you, all right?
Well, you didn't know about it.
Yeah, oh, they didn't tell you about it, right?
No.
So you went out to Perry Island by ship.
Nope, we went out to Perry Island. I left Travis Air Force
Oh.
Base in my wool suit. He used to travel, everybody would travel in suits then, even the military MATS, Military Airport Transport Service. We went out to Honolulu, and MATS being what MATS was, and you'd wait, and they'd say, okay, get aboard the plane. You get aboard the plane, they'd say, oh, get off the plane. And then you get aboard
You
the
got
plane,
bumped.
and then you get off the plane. They'd always have something go wrong with the planes, and so we just stayed there, and finally, they said, okay, you should be back here at 4 in the morning, so we went to the officers club, because that's where they let us stay. 4 in the morning, you were back there, and they said, get aboard the plane, get aboard the plane, get off the plane, get on the plane, get off the plane. Somewhere during that, we finally took off and went to Kwajalein, I think it was. There was a fierce battle there during
Yeah.
World War II.
Yeah.
And then we went, I don't remember where else, we had another stop. Maybe it was just Kwajalein, then I went to Eniwetok, and then from there to Perry Island. Maybe it wasn't Eniwetok, it was another big island, close to Perry, and then we went over there, and the old landing barges. There I was in my wool suit. And I got there and they lost my luggage. So I had a wool suit. And I wound up getting just a little khaki shirt or something, Hawaiian shirt, and some khaki shorts. That was my attire for the...
You ever find your luggage?
Yeah, they found it about a week later, I got it. Anyway, it had gone to Japan.
Well, good place, all right. So you were now at Perry Island.
Yep. And my job was to be in an electronics laboratory aboard YAG 39, which was one of the old Liberty ships.
It was
And-
the USS George Eastman.
Is that the name of it? You looked it up? Yeah. I didn't
Well,
know
I've
the
heard of
name.
it before from other interviews.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't remember the name.
YAG 39 is an infamous ship that attended all the festivities of the Atomic Energy Commission.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's where I was, in the bow. And our lab was about, I think it was, they told us 20 feet, but I don't see how it could be below that much water in the YAG. Anyhow, we had a little lab up there, and we'd go out to the test and do figure eights in the fallout pattern, because we had little sampling trays on an elevator. We'd get sample trays, and they'd come down, we measure the radiation and take spectra of the gamma ray radiation, and then we'd do it in a time interval to see how things were decaying, and then we could identify the isotopes that were in there.
Now, wait a minute, whoa.
But,
You joined your ship,
yep,
the YAG 39,
yep,
in Perry Island.
yep,
They would carry out several shots
yeah,
throughout whatever period of time you were over there at different places.
yep.
And you actually went into the fallout areas on the YAG 39,
Yeah.
measuring radioactivity.
Yeah, we saw,
You lucky guy.
we saw one of the biggest detonations out there. I think it was about a 10 or 12 megaton weapon. And they told us we were about 75 miles from the shot. We were over the horizon. And I remember we had these dark glasses. They're like welding glasses, and you couldn't find, I tried to find the sun at noon, South Pacific. Wasn't able to do that. And that's how dense they were. So we put on these goggles and turned away from the shot, and they counted down. You could hear them on the ship through the speakers. 10, 9, 8, 7, boom. And everything just was like daylight outside. 75 miles away, just like daylight. And so you waited a few seconds, took off the goggles, and you could turn around. You could see this fireball come up over the horizon, and it's intense, very intense orange, and it's surrounded by sort of a eerie glow, purple glow. It just undulates up there as the fireball's coming out. That's called teller glow. It's from the nitrogen in the atmosphere, and it just follows it up. And fireball keeps going up. And eventually it cools down, so it's just a big dark cloud, and then it comes up, punctures through the atmosphere and starts to mushroom up. Then sometimes it'll puncture through another layer and go up, form a second mushroom. Then we'd head out into it, and
Were you required to be on deck during the,
oh, no.
No,
we
you were
wanted
just
to-
curious.
We wanted to be there, yeah.
Really?
We wanted to see those things go off.
So
Oh,
they
and then
go-
you could see the shock wave,
That's
even
what I was
from that
gonna ask.
distance, you could see the shock wave come
Coming
across
at
the
you.
water that far away. And the ship would go, you'd see the front of the ship go like that, and go right down the ship, you could feel it on it, wherever you were, and go off.
Did you
the
feel the
edge.
blast at that time?
I don't remember the blast.
That
But
radioactive
we-
blast that came
Well, there was
over
no
you?
no radioactivity from that distance.
Oh,
You
really?
just have the initial gamma surge.
Oh.
But the radioactivity comes from the components of the bomb and the part of the atoll that gets mixed in with all the radioactive debris. And this was a hydrogen bomb versus an atomic bomb, so they were a little cleaner.
Mhm. So once the explosion took place, the old Yag 39 had just start
Out to
in
it.
towards the blast
Yeah.
and start measuring,
You just do figure eights, and I think they probably had a couple ships out there doing the same thing. They have planes that would go through the cloud, and that's when
Yeah.
some pilots, young invincible pilots, would take off through it. And they told us some of them were sick and throwing up by the time they got down.
any precautions taken by you on the Yag 39?
Well, just stay
Had a
on.
You had a badge.
Yeah, I had a badge and I forgot it. And I was down in front, I said, I better go get my badge. And they said, you better go get my badge. It was down in my stateroom. So I went up out of our little compartment, ran like hell down this long corridor, got my badge, ran back. I had 15 Rinkins on it by the time I got back.
So 0 to 15?
Yeah.
And what's deadly or what's
500 Rinkins was 50% lethal.
500? So
Yeah,
you're a
it
long
was
way from
long
that.
way from that.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to get it too often.
No, I wouldn't imagine you would.
Because it's accumulative.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
All right, so 15 this shot, 25 the next
Right.
shot, it just keeps...
Right, it keeps adding
Okay.
up. And at that time, the thing I thought was least lethal was low-level radioactivity. Later to be found out to be the most lethal. And that's why a lot of people got into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even the physicists, during when they were experimenting with these things, and they would, at Berkeley, they'd take these little crosses and little memorabilia, and they'd put them in a neutron beam and irradiate them. That made them radioactive, and they then put them around their neck because they'd glow. Then pretty soon they noticed, hey, I've got a little imprint to that on my chest. And a lot of their early physicists died
Yeah.
because of that.
Nobody knew what
Yeah.
they had
No, they
at
didn't.
that time. They really
Yeah.
didn't know.
The trouble with the radiation, low-level stuff, is most of it's long-lived, and it goes into the lungs
Yeah.
and vital parts of the body, and it just concentrates, and may take 20 years to get you, but they didn't have any statistics. They didn't have it on
Right.
Japan.
We've interviewed several people in this room, very room, sitting in that very chair that have had complications.
No,
because
surely.
of that, yeah.
And
So-
our captain on the ship, I'm sure, did, because he would go out and stand in the fall and watch it coming by. He'd come
Yeah.
back in, and the radiation physicist would be after him with masking tape to take all the particles off of him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How about a
That's
wash
what they
tape?
cleaned it up with. No, they did, masking tape was their friend, just like during World War
Did the
II.
Yag 39 have a washdown system aboard it?
No.
No, nothing.
You got a
Oh,
hose,
my God.
wash it overboard.
So you did this for about a year?
I worked there for 2.5 years.
Oh, at the lab, but
Yeah.
you were down on the island.
For
About 5 months.
5 months? 5 months. The expert says 5 months.
Okay.
She knows, because I, sending her letters.
Okay, so you were down there, why don't you describe your life down there for us?
Very leisure.
What did you do when you
Drink.
weren't aboard the Yag 39?
Yeah, we went out every night and had a little booze out at the officers club. 'Cause
Where?
You could get a bottle of scotch for $1.50 or something like that. So we'd go down and play poker.
That was on Perry Island?
Yeah, that was on Perry Island.
So there were some facilities there?
Oh, yeah, they all had to have booze and good food. The food was outstanding. My
Mhm.
home's in Navier.
Mhm.
And people would go down and play poker, and I remember one night, somebody won jacks or better with a pair of deuces. He opened it.
That was the contamination going on.
And at night, a lot of times they'd say, remember to leave all your doors and windows open, because there was gonna be a shot in one of the close islands. They'd leave 10 kilotons or something. Here, kaboom, shockwave would go through the barracks, and then you go back to sleep.
Oh, my God.
There were, I don't know how many I saw go off, but I saw a lot go off, probably on 5, 10, something like that.
And that was all Operation Red Wing?
Yeah, it's all Red Wing, and
Mhm.
even that was very impressive to me when I saw that big one go off. I thought, if all of the leaders of the country, every country in the world, come and see one of those, there'd never be another war.
Good point.
It was just. and
Or
I
they'd
was
say,
convinced.
I want one of those.
Well, my impression then was that that's probably gonna be the thing that kept us out of another world war.
Well, they
And I
kind of
think it
did.
has.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just very impressive.
So it was a kind of a leisure life while you were there?
Yeah, we went
Except
down
when you were on
swimming.
ship, aboard ship, then you had to do a few things, I guess.
And we'd always try to fool Marines, because we had different level compounds. Be out in the outer level, and you had to have confidential, and you had to have secret and top secret and something beyond that. So we'd always get into a Jeep and try to get as many guys in there as we could, because the Marines' rule had to be that they had to touch the badges. And so you'd clip them onto various parts of your body, and make it embarrassing for the Marines have to touch the badges. And then they'd, finally one guy really got ticked off at that, and he rammed his M1 into somebody's ribs and said, "Give me your badge." That was the end of that. So we got friendly with the Marines. We
Well, as a
teased them
former
anymore.
Marine, I would be highly insulted with that, and I think maybe I would have been the one that did one.
Well, maybe you were the guy.
No, I wasn't the guy. I wasn't the guy. So that was an amusing thing to do for
Yeah.
a while. You just found things like that to do to
Yeah,
keep
we
yourself
race
entertained.
jeeps in the sand
Hmm.
and go swimming. They found a stonefish in the swimming area one time. Stonefish is very lethal. We were told they kill you in about 15 seconds.
Okay.
It's a fish that looks like a stone. That's
Yeah.
why they call it a stonefish.
Yeah.
They have spines that stick out.
Right.
At the base of the little spine, they have a little tiny poison sac, and you step down, and it pushes the poison up to you, and it's a nerve toxic. Yeah, it's very lethal, very fast.
Nobody got hit by one.
No, but I'd only go out in the water about that deep from there, I'd sort of swim out and try not to touch my feet down on the bottom.
So, it was a good life for about 5 or 6
Yeah.
months. No work to do except when you were aboard ship, or did
Well,
you have to?
no, we had to analyze all this data.
Okay.
And so we'd be outside, and I remember that little old island, there must have been 95% humidity or something like that. And then you go into the electronics room, and it was 65, and
Mhm.
20% humidity, and you just about
Heaven.
freeze up.
Heaven.
Well, it felt pretty bad going in.
Well, I guess it did for an old Hawaiian. How many people were on this island? Was it a lot of people, or any natives, or?
No, all the natives were gone from the island.
Okay.
They shipped them all out, and I can't answer about the number of people.
Any women?
Oh, are you kidding? No.
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 So
Not
it was
even
an island?
Not even photographs.
So you were right there with a bunch of men for about 6 months?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. And did you like it?
No, it was different. Would I like to stay there another year or two? Probably not. I think
Right.
6 months or 5 months was about enough. The food was absolutely outstanding.
Something had to be.
And they said, that's one important thing, is that wherever you go to a place like that, you gotta have the food as good as possible. So usually the first thing that starts a real minor riot is the quality of food. Give them good food, they're happy.
And good scotch.
Yeah, good scotch. And we got, shouldn't tell you this on tape, this is another thing we did. They used to have these old movies up there. They'd show outdoor movies every night, and they'd have cowboy westerns like that. There'd always be a good guy and a bad guy, so some of us took one of these battle lanterns. It's huge, it's about 6 wet cells. And we put a mask over the front, and we carved some writing in there with an arrow. So we were all out there watching, and this picture came out, and the bad guy came out, and there went flash, 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 flash. And everybody stopped, started to laugh. And it was a little sign that said asshole with an arrow on it.
Boys will be boys,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
So we entertained ourselves.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. Well, you were there for about 5 or 6 months and
And went back.
went back. Do you suffer any complications because
None
of
that
it?
I know of.
None that you know of. Okay, well, that's good. So you went home and continued to work for the lab
Yep, for, what was that, another 2 years or something like that.
in San Francisco?
Then decided to go back to grad school. And we chose Boulder, Colorado, which had a good PhD program there. And the reason I went there was because George Gamow, who was a very famous physicist, was teaching there at that time. And they had a good program. And we backed up. I applied late, so I didn't have a fellowship or anything like that. We applied late. And got there, and Dot went to what's then called the National Bureau of Standards, and she got a job there as a mathematician. We had no money, just the stuff in our car. that
You're
we
gonna have
had.
to back up a minute now.
Okay.
Because I'm not aware of Dot in your life
Oh,
in a serious way
1957.
yet.
Yeah, that's it was 1957. We're gonna celebrate our 50th now.
Okay. While you were
Yeah.
working for the lab, you
Yeah,
got married.
she taught at Cappuccino High School down the peninsula.
Okay. Then you both
So
went off to
We
Colorado.
both went off to Colorado in 1959, I think it was. And we went out there in our little Ford coupe and top carrier, and everything we had was in the car. No jobs or anything. We just decided we'd go there. And we went there. We were there about a week, and Doc got a job at NBS, and I went in, and they said they had a position open as a teaching fellowship, so I got that. So we were actually doing pretty well at that time.
So now you were kind of a teacher-student.
Yep. And I got to be George Gamow's teaching assistant.
Well, that's a feather in your cap.
George Gamow was a weird guy as well. About 6'2", a great big beer belly, and he always had a drink and a cigarette in his hand wherever he was. And he'd get up and give a lecture, and he'd just be smoking constantly, and he'd sometimes be smoking chalk because he didn't know which hand he had to pitch in.
And you wanted to be just like him.
No, that was the end of that. George Gamow didn't know what was really going on. He's the one who predicted the black body radiation, 3.5 degrees that they found in 87, I think it was.
Okay.
And he wrote books.
Yeah, he wrote lots of books.
Okay.
Yeah, good guy, yeah, good physicist.
And you finally got degreed?
Got degreed, but before that, I think it was about the last year, I got a Fulbright, and we went to Italy. I lived in Italy for a year.
Oh, that must have been interesting for you.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That sounds great. Both of you went.
Yeah, yeah.
And a 5-month-old baby.
Ah,
Yeah,
so you were creating a family by that time.
yeah. Had some good experiences there.
Okay. And what was your most memorable experience about Italy?
Probably about 2 or 3. One is this very famous physicist sitting aside of me in the bus when we got on the bus to go to Perugia, Francis Lowe. taught at MIT, and I didn't know him, but I knew who he was. He was there with his family, and we were there. I was right across the aisle from him. He had everybody settled down, and he looked over at me, and I said, "Boy, am I glad. Well, I'll be glad when we get to Naples." And he said, "Naples? We're supposed to be going to Perugia." So I told him, "Yeah, we're going to Perugia, but I'm sure Francis Lowe still remembers me because of that." And then another time, we decided we were going to take a big trip and go up through northern Italy and then down through Yugoslavia, Dubrovnik, and then come back into Italy. Well, we had a bit of a problem getting into Yugoslavia because all the passes were closed. We had to find a little path that went up through the snow. It's just closed, and we got up to the top, and there's just 2 Yugoslavian soldiers there and a German physics student, as a matter of fact. And I thought, well, I'd try Russian because I spoke Russian then. And I tried Russian with the Yugoslavs, they didn't like Russian. The Yugoslavs and Russians are all big friends. And the other guy was a German, they didn't like the Germans much either. But you had to declare everything, every penny you had. And so the German student spoke some English, and I knew a little German. And we finally got the forms filled out, so we took him in our little car, and we drove down this little dirt road, and we get through these Yugoslavian villages, and on the other side, no road going out. He'd have to drive around in the woods till he found something. Out there with a 5, what was he then?
He was about a
Probably
year
7
old,
or a year old or something. And a baby and we just cruised around. Finally, we let the German student off, and we went down to stay with Ljubljana, I think it was. Next day, we were going up to go down to Dubrovnik, and I remember a steep hill we were coming up, and I'd driven in Rome for a while in our little Volkswagen Bug, and the road was kind of wide, and there was a barricade on our side, and I saw trucks coming down. I said, well, I'll just go around the barricade. And the trucks came down, and one went behind us, and one blocked us off, swung around in front of us, and they all jumped out. It was a Yugoslavian army convoy truck. And they came down, surrounded the car, and I think they poked a rifle in the car, and there we were sitting in there, and we had D on the back of our Volkswagen, which is Deutschland. And they didn't speak any German, they didn't speak any Italian, they didn't speak any Russian, and no English. So they started shouting, and I started shouting back at them. Finally, an officer came down, and he showed him his passports and let us go. And we were driving up the hill, and I thought, you know, that was really dumb. If they could have put me away in prison for photographing secretive sites or something like that, and the U.S. Embassy would have protested. Dot would have been there. And
Back
what
in
would
those
she
days,
have
you're
done?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we went up, we picked up, we came up this little dirt road, and there was a house there, and somebody saw us coming, ran back into the house, and a little old lady came running out with her suitcases, and they flagged us down, and they wanted us to take her somewhere, so we told her to get into the car, and she got in the back of the car, and we drove down, I don't know, 100 miles or something to wherever she wanted to go. We took her there, and Dot communicated with her mostly with hand signals, I think, and we took her down, and that night I said, let's get out of this country. And we
I would
did. That was not a smart thing to do.
So we never saw Dubrovnik.
No, never saw Dubrovnik.
Okay. Well, after the Fulbright, well, you satisfied the requirements there for the scholarship. You went,
Yeah.
then you went and taught for about 30 years
Yep,
at University of Michigan and Toledo
yep,
University.
yep.
The time we have left, what I'd really like to talk about is, I know that while you were at the University of Toledo, you went on, for lack of a better word, detached duty with NASA.
Right, that was 2 summers,
How many?
2,
2 summers.
69 and 70,
Okay. So that was only a summer program that
Yeah.
you went to?
3 months.
Okay.
And they paid the equivalent of our salary, I think, plus 20%, because we had to rent
Right.
a house,
Right.
get there, they
Okay.
paid travel. Yeah, and that was in 69 when Apollo 11 went up.
Why don't you tell us about your experiences with the Apollo program?
Okay, the very first day you had to go into the compound and go up to the administration office and get badges and whatever else you had to do, fill out paperwork. And I got in the elevator, and the very first guy I met was Buzz Aldrin.
How about that?
And we chit-chatted for a while, going up the elevator and out of the elevator. Then I worked on some other programs, and we really enjoyed it there. We went around the Space Center, and they had all sorts of mock-ups of the lunar landers and Apollo capsules. Then when they went up to the moon, Dot and I and the kids got to go up in mission control, and we were up there for part of the time when they landed. I think we went up there that night. And so it was July 20th, 1969, that evening, we were up there. And we got to listen to the communications and stuff. We weren't in the actual mission control, but they had a little booth that they let certain people get up there in.
How did you warrant that type of treatment, that you could get up there?
I don't know, they could put us VIPs.
Really?
I don't know why.
What,
It's just a little.
what kind of a job were you doing for NASA during this period?
I was doing research at that time with some people in, I don't even remember the name of the group. They had an astrophysics group. I was doing some astrophysics with them.
I see.
And they did that because of the things that I had published before that. And I was lucky enough to get a fellowship, or did they call them a fellowship? They probably call it a fellowship at that time, because that was tax exempt.
All right. So you met Buzz Aldrin,
Yep,
and you were in mission control
Yeah.
during the Apollo 11 shot when they landed on the moon.
yep.
How did that make you feel?
Very exciting. That was one of my big thrills.
Tell us about it.
About Apollo 11? Or
Yeah,
we-
you said it was a big
Oh.
thrill, and
Oh, yeah, well, there were all kind of astronauts that I shared my office with, a couple of them. Carl Henneis was one of the fellows, but he never flew.
Mhm.
And all the scientists, astronauts hated John Glenn.
Oh, really?
That's when they no, Alan Shepard, excuse me, not John Glenn. Take it back, John Glenn, it was Alan Shepard. He was a very cocky guy.
He's a Navy guy.
And the first time they got in there, he said, "None of you are gonna fly."
Really?
Yeah. And so they got off on Bad City, but they didn't care. The ones I met didn't care for them that much.
That's interesting.
Then, let's see, the guys came back from the shot, and they went into isolation. I don't remember how long, I'd have to look that up, but after the isolation, they had a splashdown party at the Astrodome. And about a week before that, we'd gone on an Astrodome tour. They took us all the way up to the top, and they let us off and quit the tour at the top floor, and we were supposed to take the elevators down, but we didn't do that. We hunted around for a way to get down. We found lots of little passageways, and we found one that was open. We went down that passageway and then went out to the street. There was a big room at the end of the passageway, about 3 or 4 times the size of this room. And a week later, they had the splashdown party, and my folks had come out because they gave us a bunch of tickets. They gave us VIP tickets. Again, I don't know why, but we were right up front where all the guys were. And after the party, everybody dispersed. We said, "Oh, let's go show my folks the Astrodome." So we wandered up to the top where we'd been before, and we went down our little ramp, came down that little ramp into this room, and there were all of the astronauts, and Frank Sinatra and Flip Wilson, and a bunch of dignitaries from the Manned Spacecraft Center. My dad saw Neil Armstrong, went over there and grabbed his arm and pumped at his hand and said what a great job he was doing. And he talked with Collins and Aldrin, and Alan Shepard was there, and John Glenn, all of the astronauts from the Mercury program were there. that could be there.
Wow.
And we think what happened is that they had guards there. And as Neil Armstrong came in one door, we think the guard came, that was supposed to be guarding our door, ran over to Neil Armstrong, and we happened to be there and walked in right behind him.
Perfect timing.
Then we turned around, there's a guard at that door that we can come in. So we were there and everybody wondered who these strange people were running around getting autographs of all of these people.
That's great. One thing we don't wanna, I don't wanna really cut you short, but
Yep.
right in front of you, you've got some very interesting material that I forgot to get you to show us when we were talking
Okay.
about Pearl Harbor.
This is a Honolulu Star Bulletin from 1938, January 1938, January 24th, up here. And there was a big earthquake.
Okay.
And then, I don't have the papers from the 7th.
January 24th, you had left. You weren't there anymore.
No, 1938.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
1938, yeah. And this one is from November 28th, 1941, and this is about 1 week before the attack on Pearl Harbor. And you gotta read those headlines. Why don't you read them, Bill?
Next peace step is up to Japan. They were already on the way.
They were on their way. And then this was from December 9th, 1941.
60 enemy planes reported off Pacific coast by the Army. And that was, as you said, December the 9th.
Yep. Then I think this was the Honolulu Advertiser. And this one is a Honolulu Star Bulletin. This is also the 9th.
Japan staging wide blitz in the Pacific. Only Oahu under attack here.
And this,
Well, I like that. Food stores open tomorrow.
and here we have December 10th, 1941.
Manila is raided by 57 Japanese warplanes. Several enemy pilots down. Firearms must be surrendered. We will win, says the president. I like the little headlines.
Yeah, I do remember that we did hear a rumor that, and I think it turned out to be true, that Japanese had crashed on Niihau, which is the Hawaiian island, and the Hawaiians killed him. He shot one of the Hawaiians.
I think
a
I
big-
heard that story.
Big old Hawaiian, he shot several times. I think they carried 22 probably, and that was enough to stop a big Hawaiian. And this is from the Honolulu Advertiser. This is also the December 11th.
Germany, Italy declare war, U.S. action expected today. Army plane sinks a Japanese battleship. That soon.
I guess.
U.S. warplanes repulse enemy raid on Manila. Führer, Duce go to aid of Axis partners. Lone bomber makes 3 direct hits. Blackout cuts city crime to an all-time low.
Amazing.
Really? I would think it would increase.
Oh, they had soldiers all around with rifles on the corners.
Those are great papers.
Yeah, they're,
Get a chance to read all the little stuff down there, but that would really tell you what life was like
That's
in
right.
Honolulu
yeah,
at the time.
at that time, yeah. And I did read through them at one time, but they're so fragile
Sure, we
now.
have
I
to be
don't-
careful. Take care of them,
Yeah.
please. In the few minutes that we have left, Bill, is there anything we missed that you perhaps would like to cover?
I can't think of anything much. I think we'll touch a lot of
Australia.
bases. Well, that's not to do with this.
No.
We lived in Australia for a year.
Okay.
I had some interesting times.
Okay. With everything that you've done, all the places you've been, all the projects you participated in, is there anything that you'd like to pass on to future generations that may review this tape, your family members will?
Well, I can pass on something that my mom said, get your education.
And you did.
They said, you know, that probably because of her, so she always would say, they can take your money, they can take your land, they can take everything you own, but they can never take your education away from you.
Hmm.
It's good advice.
That's a pretty powerful statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I appreciate you coming here and talking to us today. I found your story extremely interesting.
Well, thank you.
I want to thank you for what you've done, not only for being here, but also for what you've done for, the country and the government and so on. It certainly was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure
Talking
meeting
with
you
you.
and talking with you and all of you. And I thank you for your volunteer work.
Well, thank you
This
very
is a
much.
great project, and
I appreciate that.
appreciate all the time that you people are doing on it.
Well, I think we'll get you to participate in some things too.
Yeah, good chance of that.
That's good.